In this video, you'll see what to do if you need to place an order in WorldShare Acquisitions for an item when there is no record in WorldCat. So the first step is to do a thorough search for the item in WorldCat. If you find a record, you'll need to determine if it's a match. If no record is found or the record you found doesn't fit the matching criteria, you can use Record Manager to create a brief, also known as an abbreviated level record, and add it as a new record to WorldCat. This would be an encoding level 3 record, and as you will see, there are very few mandatory fields. We will go over the guidelines for adding abbreviated level records, but you can find the complete guidelines in Chapter 2.4 of bib formats and standards. When you receive the order item, you can upgrade and replace the brief record with a more complete cataloging record, since you'll have the item in hand with access to more information. Before adding a new record to WorldCat, it's important to do a search, not only to avoid unnecessary work and avoid adding a duplicate record to WorldCat, but also you may find a similar record, for example, a different format or edition, that you may be able to use to derive a new record. After you do a search in WorldCat, you can use the guidelines in Chapter 4 of bib formats and standards to check these fields to determine if the record you find matches the item you're ordering. The 245 title field, the 250 edition statement if present, the 260 or 264 if you're viewing an RDA record for the publisher and publication date, the 300 physical description, and the 490 series statement if present. Again, the complete guidelines will be found in Bib Formats and Standards Chapter 4. If there is no record in WorldCat, you can create a brief level record from a work form, or if you found a similar record, for example, a different format, you can use that record to derive a new record. These are the mandatory fields you'll need to enter for a brief level record. And the 040, the source of cataloging, is a system-supplied field, so you won't need to enter that. We'll go over all of these in more detail in just a moment. These are the fields that are considered required if applicable for brief level records. That means that if it applies to the item and you can supply the information, you should. Remember, the more data you can add, the better, since that will be helpful to others searching for the item in WorldCat. These are additional required if applicable fields. If you do find a record that is similar, for example, if I was looking for this recording called The Light Side, but I wanted the CD rather than the audio cassette, I could derive a new WorldCat record for the CD format from this existing record. I could simply find the record and select Derive, and then do my editing to create the new record. If I don't find any record in WorldCat that matches my item, I can create a new record from a work form. So let's say I have an order request for a book called The Mountain by John Rennan, and my order request says the publisher is Dutton, and the book was published in 2020. I've done a thorough search, and I haven't found any record, even with a different publication date or a different format. So I'll go through the steps to create a brief level record using a work form in Record Manager. So to get started, I'll click on Create Record under Record Manager. And I'll leave the record editor set to Mark 21 view. And I'll also leave it set to the book format and the AACR2 form. I can always add additional fields for RDA later when I upgrade the record. And then I'll click Create. And now I see the Create Record work form. To get started, I'll expand the leader by clicking the arrow next to it. I'll leave the type of record set to the default A for language material. And I'll also leave the bib level at the default M for monograph, which is correct for my item. I'll click the drop down to select the encoding level. This is the level of completeness for the cataloging record. And I'll select 3, abbreviated level. Next, I'll open the drop down for descriptive cataloging form. And I'll select A for AACR2. Then I'll click Done to save the changes I made in the leader. Next, I'll expand the 008, and then I'll click the Type of Date drop-down, and I'll select S. This is just a single date. Then I'll click in the text box for the actual date of publication, and I'll enter the date I have, 2020. Then I'll click the drop-down for place of publication, and I'll scroll to select NYU for New York. Since I know the publisher is Dutton, the place of publication is likely New York. And again, you can guess the place if you're not 100% sure, that's okay. Then I'll scroll down to see more of the 008, and I'll click the drop down for the language code, and I'll scroll down to select ENG, English, for the language of resource. And now I'll click Done to save the changes I made to the 008. Next, since I have an author for this book, I'll add a 100 field. This is not a mandatory field, but it's considered required if applicable. But if you're fairly certain this is a single author and you have the author's name, you should enter it in a 100 field. This is considered now the main entry for the record. So I'm going to enter the 100 here. And then I'll enter a 1 for the first indicator since this is a surname. Now if I want to check the correct values for the indicators, I can right-click anywhere in the 100 field, and when the menu appears, I'll go to Field Help, and then I'll select Mark Field Help. And Bib Formats and Standards opens in another window with help for the 100 field. So here I can see that the correct code for the first indicator is a 1 for a surname, and the second indicator is undefined, so a blank is correct. I'll enter my author's name in subfield A, which is for personal name. I can also see the subfield 4 is used for relationship, but I don't have to enter this in my record. When I'm finished looking at the input standards for the 100 field, I'll just close out this window. So I'll delete the subfield 4 that was in the work form template, and I'll enter the author's name in subfield A, Renan, John. The first field is understood to be subfield A, so I don't have to enter the delimiter and the subfield code. Next, I'll click in the 245 field for the title, and I'm going to right-click again to look at the input standards in Bib Formats. And I'll select Field Help and then Mark Field Help. And Bib Formats will open again at the 245 input standards in another window. So for the first indicator, I can see that a 1 is appropriate for an added entry for the title. This is what I should use since I'm using a 100 field as the main entry for the author. For the second indicator, which is for non-filing characters, I'll enter a 4 since my title is preceded by the word the. So I have 3 characters for the word the and an additional character for the space between the and mountain. This is to tell the system that the indexing begins at the 5th character for this title. I can also see that subfield A is for my main title, subfield B is for a subtitle, but I don't have one for my item. Subfield C is for the statement of responsibility. Subfield C is required if applicable for a brief record, so I could enter it since I know the author. And subfield H is for the general material designation that would be to indicate if this is something other than a book. However, subfield H is now obsolete, and the input standard now says do not use. So now I'll close the window for Bib Formats, and I'll enter this in my record for the 245. So it's a 1 for the first indicator for an added entry for the title, and I'll enter a 4 for the second indicator for the 245, and that's for the non-filing characters for the word the and the space after it. And I'm going to highlight the subfield codes H, B, and C, and I'll delete them for now. And now I'll type in the title in subfield A, the mountain. And since I know the author, I'll add back the subfield C with the author's name. This should be entered as it appears on the title page. Now, since I don't actually have the book yet, this could be changed when I upgrade the record. For example, if the title page actually says by John Renan. Now I'll go to the 260 to enter the publication information I have. And again, I want to go to Bib Formats and Standards to check the appropriate values for the indicators and subfield codes. So I'll right-click and I'll select Field Help and Mark Field Help. So I can see the appropriate indicators for 260 are blank. And I can see that subfield A is for the place of publication, subfield B is for the publisher, and subfield C is for the date. And if I scroll down, I can see some examples of the 260 field and the correct ISBD punctuation. Now I'll close Bib Formats and Standards and go back to my record. So I'll enter the place of publication in subfield A, New York, followed by a colon, and I'll enter the publisher Dutton in subfield B. And then I'll enter the date, 2020, in subfield C. Now that I've entered all the mandatory fields and all of the required if applicable fields where I had the information for the item, I'm ready to finish up my record. So I'm going to go to the record menu at the top of the screen and I'll select Reformat. This will arrange the fields in correct tag order and will delete any of the unused fields or subfields from my record. And the system has confirmed that my record has been reformatted. And you can see now that those unused fields have been deleted. Next, I'm going to validate my record, which will check on the validity of the tags and subfield codes and make sure non-repeatable fields, such as the 245 field, appear only once. So I'll click again on the record menu and I'll select Validate. And the system confirms that the record is validated. If I had any errors in the record, it would have failed validation and it would point out the validation errors for me to correct. My last step now is to add the record to WorldCat so I can use it for my order. So I'll click on the Save menu. If I'm not quite ready to add this to WorldCat, I could add it to my Save in Progress file and come back later to review it and add it to WorldCat. But if I'm finished with my record, I want to select Add to WorldCat. I don't want to add my holdings yet since I'm just going to use this record for ordering now. So I'll select Add Record to WorldCat. And the system confirms the record has been saved and is now in WorldCat. An OCLC number is now assigned to this record. Now I'm going to copy the new OCLC number so I can go back to Acquisitions and find the record to order it. Now that there's a record, I would find it using Discover Items in Acquisitions and then select Add to Order to add it to a new or existing purchase order. And before I place the order, I would add a note for this item to show on receiving that reminds me to alert cataloging to upgrade my brief level record to a fuller level of cataloging, verifying the fields I've entered, and adding additional fields as necessary for a more complete record. If you have questions about ordering when there's no WorldCat record and creating brief level records, please go to help.oclc.org for documentation, training, and contact information for OCLC support in your region.